Hi, Mr. Harris here, and today is on England and France developing, Chapter 14, Section 3A. So 3A as in there will be a 3B where we focus on France, and today we're focusing more on what would become England. So if we look at the earliest stages of history, the English were Anglo Saxons. They were a group of people who were one of the few that were able to ward off numerous Viking invasions, and they were led by Alfred the Great. However, this comes to an end in the early 11th century when Danish King Canute conquers England and he merges together those who already lived there, the Anglo-Saxons, along with the Vikings who came in and conquered them. Now, chaos ensues in 1066 when Canute dies and there is no official heir. During this time period, there's a power struggle. William, the Duke of Normandy, also known as William the Conqueror, invades the northern parts of France, and at the same time his rival Herod Godwinson, an Anglo-Saxon, tries to claim the throne. We have this huge battle known as the Battle of Hastings in 1066, where the Normans defeat the English and they take over all the territory. Now the Normans are in power. Now keep this battle in the back of your mind, as later on we will approach the Battle of Agincourt about 250 years later, where this time, 350 years later, where the rules sort of are reversed. This nice little visual sort of gives you an idea of how close northern France is to southern parts of the Anglo-Saxon territory, right? The only thing that divides them is the English Channel. So following the Battle of Hastings, a military victory, the Normans continued to take over what was formerly known as Anglo-Saxon territory, not only through power and bloodshed, but through wedlock. An example is the marriage between Norman, Henry II, and Eleanor of Aquitaine from France. During this time period, we also see some major changes happen that have major long-term effects. So, for example, we begin to see the emergence of royal courts. We begin to see taxes being collected. So they're beginning to run the area as a state, as opposed to little areas controlled by lords. And they introduced for the first time the style known as juries. So this is a system that countries like the United States uses, where you have regular people come in and help come up with a decision in regards to whether or not someone is guilty or not guilty. It was also during this period where we see something known as the common law being created. So let's talk a bit about the Magna Carta. So to understand the Magna Carta, we have to understand King John, also known as John Softsword. Unlike his brother Richard Lionheart, who was very popular, John was very unpopular among many people, especially the nobles and those who had power. They felt like John was abusing his power, and as a result, they forced him to sign in 1215 a declaration saying that the king will provide nobles with the rights, that they will have, the churches would have rights to not be infringed upon by the government. And this is looked upon as sort of the first few documents in the world where people's civil rights are being protected. In fact, this document goes on to affect various documents in the future, including the United States of America, where historians often cite Magna Carta as being one of the base documents the colonies based their Declaration of Independence on. Now, this document is a complex one. Even though it was passed in 1215, keep in mind that it was repealed and taken away on several occasions, and it was rewritten again, and rewritten one more time until it really stayed. And another point to keep in mind is that yes, it's about freedom rights and people's individual rights, but this is only looking at the middle and upper classes. So the lower classes, if you're a peasant, you're not protected. If you're a woman, you're not protected. So it wasn't necessarily protecting everyone in society, just those that were perhaps middle or middle upper class and above. Now during this time, we also see what's known as the Parliament emerge in the late 1200s. The Parliament is where people discuss, debate various legal, social issues, and they have an upper house and a lower house, which is a very interesting format. And this format was later on adopted by countries like the United States, where you have the Senate, and then you also have the Congress. It's a very interesting question one could ask themselves when it comes to this relationship between the Normans who came in and conquered the Anglo-Saxons, and whether or not they'd be quote-unquote English. Well, the answer is sort of. And the reason why it's sort of is because until these 1100s, 1200s, the Normans were never in what was known as Anglo-Saxon territory. So they've really only been there the last 8 centuries or so. With that said, if we look at England today, it's a melting pot of people from different places. It's a melting pot of the Vikings and the Normans who came in there for the last 8 centuries. And in a sense, you could say that if we just are looking at the past 400, 500, 600 years, anyone who was considered English then had clearly Norman roots or Viking roots somewhere along their bloodline. So therefore, you could consider the Normans to be English. At the same time, one could possibly say that, well, the Normans never really came in until the Battle of Hastings. Therefore, we should draw a distinction between the Anglo Saxons that were there prior to the Normans and the Normans who came in separately. Again, both arguments have their own validity, and there's no correct answer here. Copyright disclaimer: under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comments, news, reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research, and blah, 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 blah. Have a nice day. Goodbye.